Nothing But the Words, episode number 43, How to Talk About Your Book.
Welcome to Nothing But the Words, the podcast that gives you everything you need to know to write a phenomenal book. Now here's your host, your author coach, Candace L. Davis.
Hey there, welcome to Nothing But the Words. I'm your author coach, Candace L. Davis. Today, I am really excited to give you 3 ways to talk about your book. And I'm excited about it because it has not always been easy for me to talk about my writing projects. You should be talking about your book before you write it, while you're writing it, and certainly after you've written it. So jump into this episode and find out exactly how to do that. Have you ever had a celebrity freak out moment? One time, my daughter and I were shopping in a small grocery store in LA when she saw one of the Wayans brothers, and she followed him around the store. It was her little minor celebrity freak out moment. Some people freak out when they meet their favorite actors. Some people lose it when they meet their favorite athletes or singers. I am that nerd who has always felt that way about my favorite authors, my favorite writers. My husband works in entertainment, so I occasionally get to meet famous actors, famous singers, but mostly I don't care about that. Even if I enjoy their work, I'm not really super impressed to be in the room with them. And the more impressed they are with themselves, the less impressed I am with them. But that's another story. I don't follow sports. So athletes, I can take them. I can leave them. But with my favorite authors, I might look cool on the outside, but inside I'm screaming like a teenage girl meeting off the wall Michael Jackson. I'm losing it, right? So when I first got serious about writing years ago, I read about a book in the LA Times book review. I went out that very same day, bought it, read it in 2 days because the author was holding a book signing that weekend. It was an hour away from my house, and I loved the book so much. I really wanted to be at that event. I had never driven on the LA freeways before. It was a big deal to me to take an hour road trip on the freeway, but I did it because I loved the book so much. So I grabbed my daughter, who was probably 10 years old. As an introvert, she was a great wing woman for me when I would do things like this. And so we drove up the 5 freeway from South Orange County to Los Angeles. I met this author. Her name was Mary Rayco. The book was The Memory Room. And after her reading, Mary very kindly stayed behind and talked to everyone, right? She did what authors should do at their book signings. She mingled throughout the room, talked to everyone in a very engaging and genuine way. And I got up the courage to say to her, I'm a writer too. I'm writing my first book. I was just so proud of myself for saying that, right? Because at that point in time, it wasn't something that I really did. I didn't tell people about my book that I was writing. But then she asked me what my book was about. I completely froze. I could not, for the life of me, articulate an answer that would make sense to her. I stammered out something very generic and then changed the subject. She was really gracious and didn't look at me like I was crazy, and it all worked out in the end. I ended up studying with her for years in her private workshop, and she was really a priceless mentor in my development as a writer. But I have found that my difficulty way back when in talking about my book is not uncommon. I meet a lot of authors who really struggle to talk about their book for a variety of reasons. But this is a skill I highly recommend you practice and master. So if you haven't written your book yet, you may be worried about talking about it because you don't want people to steal your idea. That is a big topic. And in most cases, I would say you can talk about your book in a way that there is really nothing for people to steal and still benefit from talking about it. But I don't want to get into that on this episode. At the very least, before you write your book, you can talk to the kind of people that can give you feedback on your idea and just make sure it's people that you trust. Of course, after you write your book, talking about it will be essential. That's called marketing, but it doesn't have to be scary or boring or nerve-wracking. It's really just sharing with people what's great about your book. Marketing your book is just talking about it in a way that gets people interested in it. You can talk about your book on podcast interviews, in your email newsletters, on social media, in videos, when you give workshops, when you speak from the stage. You can talk about your book when you are out networking, not a dirty word, my friends, meeting new people and creating connections if you know how to bring it into the conversation in a way that doesn't seem self-serving. Here are 3 ways that you can talk about your book effectively and really get people interested in it. If you're writing nonfiction, you're going to really focus on describing the benefits readers will get from your book. Get it down to a simple sentence, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, starting with the title of your book, because you want to be saying the title so people remember it. So here's an example from a parenting book written by one of my coaching clients. Focused, Fearless, and Fighting, that's the title of her book. Focused, Fearless, and Fighting gives Black parents the tools they need to raise productive and ambitious children by giving them the skills and values they need to compete in a world where the odds are often against them. So that's my 1-sentence summary of her book. She might phrase it differently, but this simple sentence tells people who this book is for and what they can get out of it. And in many cases, it will open the door to take the conversation even further. A second way you can talk about your book after you've nailed down that 1 sentence that sums up what's in it for your reader is by sharing your origin story. So I'm not talking about your personal origin story necessarily. It might be that if you're writing a memoir, but the origin story of your book. And this is particularly effective in interviews and speeches when you have more time and when you really want to engage the audience by telling a story. So what inspired you to write your book? When did you first have the idea, and what was the moment, the defining moment when you knew you had to write it, or the defining moment that gave you the crux of what the book was about? Take us to that defining moment. Show us why you were willing to invest yourself in the book so we can feel invested too. Now, novelists, of course, have the benefit of telling their character stories, so they don't have to talk about themselves as much necessarily. Those of us writing nonfiction, you can tell your book's origin story as the go-to story whenever you talk about your book, but it is going to likely have something to do with you. Why does the content of this book matter to you? What made it matter to you? It doesn't mean you're the star of the show necessarily. It may be that you were inspired and motivated by something else you saw that someone else needed, but you're going to want to be able to tell that origin story. Lastly, the third way you can talk about your book is to talk about the results your book has created. Now, that might sound difficult if you haven't written the book yet, but stay with me. It doesn't matter if you are writing a memoir, a how-to book, narrative nonfiction, and yes, even fiction. You can always talk about the results. If you're still writing the book, tell us what results you've created in your life. When you're telling someone, hey, I'm writing a book about XYZ, tell us about the results that you've created in your life using whatever system, knowledge, story, or wisdom you're including in your book. Tell us your story and connect it back to what the book will do for your readers once it's written and published. Now, once you've written your book and you've published it, you may want to give away a few review copies just so you can get feedback from people on your book. Even if you don't do that, and if you're marketing your book, start talking to people about what they get from it. If someone tells you they loved your book, that's great, and that's a wonderful place to start, but you need more. Thank them, and then probe a little. What did they like about it? What specifically made a difference to them? What might they do with that information, or what have they done with it already? How did it impact them? Find out the details and then share that story with their permission, of course, or in such a way as to not reveal their identity. When you talk about your book or when you write about it in blog posts or articles, share your readers' success stories. Whether you want them to or not, your readers will eventually begin to see you as the expert on high. That might sound good, but you want to be relatable, right? So you want to be the expert, but you don't necessarily want to be on high. That's how I saw Mary at her book signing, right? I couldn't really even engage with her because I saw her as playing on a different field from the one I was on. So your readers will begin to position you that way in their minds. It's just natural for us to do that, to sort of elevate the experts. But when you talk about the results, other readers, regular people who didn't write a book on this subject, get from your book, when you share their stories, your book becomes relatable again. The more your readers see you as special, because you wrote the book on the subject, and so you're somehow way more advanced, the less relatable you become to your readers in that way. So sharing other people's stories, sharing their success stories, stories of average, everyday people who use your content will really help keep your content relatable to your readers. So to recap, talk about your book by telling people what's in it for them. Be specific. What results can they expect from the book? If it's entertainment, if it's laugh out loud fun, if it's the knowledge to do XYZ, if it's to expand the way they think, whatever it is, just tell them what they can expect to get from your book. Share your book's origin story. You want people to hear what inspired you because that will get them inspired too. What inspired you to invest so much of yourself, your time, your energy, your money, your effort into this book? Let us know so we can get on board with you with that. And finally, talk about the results your book has created or the content within it has created for yourself and for other people. Talk about your book, my friends. Talk about it before you write it with people that you trust. Talk about it while you're writing it with people who can give you feedback and help you think through it. And absolutely talk about it after you've written it and want to get it into the hands of your readers. That's all for today's episode. If you found it beneficial, please share Nothing But the Words. Share the podcast with someone you think can benefit from it. And if you share it on social media, tag me so I can follow you and say thank you. Thanks for listening to Nothing But the Words. I'm your author coach, Candace L. Davis, and I'll see you next time.